Welcome to CareerView. This is the podcast where we ask questions you want to know when it comes to pursuing a career path. I'm your host, Niraj Shamal, and each episode I will ask questions on behalf of students across the country from secondary schools and universities what they want to know when it comes to pursuing their dream job. For today's episode, we'll be asking our top questions that have been submitted by students on our CareerView website who are interested in a career path as a nurse. Today, I'm joined by 28-year-old registered nurse Sam Fatovich, who surprisingly never thought he would become a nurse, as his first area of interest in a career was in the arts. However, Sam has never looked back and now has a variety of experiences in multiple hospitals and is very passionate about mentoring young students who are also interested in this career path. This is really going to be a good one, so let's hear from him. Okay, and we're back for another episode, and as you can hear, my voice is pretty much gone, but that's not going to stop us with the fact that we have here Sam. Sam, great to have you here. How's everything going?
Yeah, really well. Thank you for having me.
No, it's great to have you. And how's the week been?
Yeah, it's been good so far. Yeah, working Monday to Friday this week, which is nice. So I get a normal weekend. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's really good to hear. Having a good weekend, obviously some time off does help. Sam, before we jump into our questions asked by students when it comes to a career path of becoming a nurse, I want to take us back to high school.
Yeah.
For yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And I want to know a little bit about yourself during high school in terms of what were you pursuing and what were you deciding to become post high school?
Yeah. So when I finished high school for year 12, I wasn't really sure quite what I wanted to do, like a lot of people. And so I decided to do visual arts as my favorite subject at school. So I decided to sort of pursue the art theory side of things, which I really enjoyed back in high school. So I did history of art at UWA, which is Bachelor of Arts. So I did that for 3 years, and then so finished the degree and sort of like went back and looked at the jobs and sort of realized where I wanted at the start of the degree and where I was when I finished it. It didn't match up anymore and wasn't where I wanted to be.
Right.
So like wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I finished the degree. I was like, I don't really know what I want to do now. Like, don't really want to work in the arts fields, like don't know what I'm going to do. So I took a year off and was like trying to talk with my parents about like trying to decide what to do, what's best kind of thing. And I was trying to decide like, what do I want to do? It's too much, like so many careers. How do I decide? Yeah. So I like sort of just talked to them a lot, my parents, and wrote down a list of like sort of things I wanted career wise and sort of like what degree would best suit me. Things I was looking for, wanted to like be hands-on, actively working with people, like preferably helping them in some capacity. Yeah. Didn't want a 9 to 5. I wanted shift work or the option of having shift work. Didn't want a desk job. Wanted to be on my feet. Yeah. Option of traveling if it was, and I wanted a degree where like finish it and there's a dedicated career towards that, because obviously with the arts fields it's not quite like that. Yeah. And so wrote that all down. Obviously health industry is something that goes that way. Yeah. And sort of tried to decide, didn't want to do med, didn't interest me. Right. Physio was cool, wasn't really for me either. Same with OT. My sister was doing medical imaging at the time, which I looked at, but I felt like I wanted like longer term patient interaction. I feel like that's a bit more high turnover. So looked at nursing and sort of ticked a lot of the boxes and gave it a go. And started at Notre Dame in 2017. Yeah. And finished the degree in 2020 and been a nurse since then. Fantastic. Yeah. And that's a very interesting journey, right? Yeah. I mean, you're starting off with an interest, finishing an arts degree. Yeah. And you had obviously a strong interest for the arts, but not a defined career path for yourself. Exactly. And I think, when did you realize that? So probably actually halfway through the degree. At first, when I was about 19, I sort of realized there are a few like potential red flags, like career-wise with what I was going to do. Okay. And then, so UWA, you get the broadening units. Yep. So I did a human biology broadening unit there to see if I liked anatomy, if potentially I'd go into nursing or a health field, sort of something like that. Did it, and I hated it. Yeah, okay. It sucked. It wasn't for me from that perspective. Yeah. I was not interested at all, and I failed the unit. I didn't do well at all. So I was like, cool, well, not interested in that anymore. Yeah, like I finished the arts degree and sort of, then went back to it. Went back to it, and to be fair, like I did the anatomy unit when I was doing nursing. I loved it. Yeah. It was smaller classes and stuff like that, and it was a bit more hands-on and in person, which it wasn't so much with like the broadening unit at UWA. So maybe that was part of it. But
Okay, I like that. And then so for nursing, you wrote all those kind of criterias down, and I really encourage that for all our listeners out there. If you're wanting to decide what career paths you want to do, it's important to write it down.
Yeah.
Because it's always in your head, right?
It's in your head, but it's hard to articulate as well. And so like write down that list and you sort of get an idea of what's going on.
Absolutely. And then I guess just for our listeners to understand, what was the real critical point for you to make a decision and go down the road of nursing?
I think for nursing, I think it was the hands-on, actively helping people or trying to help people that I think was ultimately what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And then, like I said, the other aspects like possibility of shift work on my feet, can travel with it, and set degree like afterwards kind of thing. Which is not weird, but like, so at uni, you'd sort of meet people in the first week and some of them have like really amazing stories about why they're a nurse, and they'd sort of say, oh, like my family member was really sick and I looked after them kind of thing, growing up and stuff like that. And you sort of sit there and be like, oh, I haven't really got that kind of narrative. I'm sort of like, it's not really the same thing for me, but obviously you'll have the same interests sort of thing, which is always good as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the fact that you haven't looked back and you've been a nurse for quite a few years now.
Yeah, 2.5 years or so.
Definitely shows the fact that you made the right choice.
Yeah, I'm really happy with it.
Fantastic, Sam. And now jumping into our questions that are asked by students. The first question that we have for you is, does nursing provide a structured work-life balance, or is it quite chaotic?
So I can only talk about my experience side of things because I've only worked in hospitals as a nurse. So obviously there's a bit less structure to your work-life balance compared to, say, if you're working something a bit more clinic-based where you're not working weekends and you're doing a bit more of the office hours. I think from the hospital side of things, probably the three most standard shifts you have as a nurse, there are extra ones, but the three most standard ones are 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m.
Okay.
1 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. or 9 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. That's the night shift. And you can, like, there's a request roster. It goes about 2 months out in advance. You can request your days off and what shifts you want. And managers are really good. They will try their best to accommodate for what you want. So, like, for me, the request roster's there. It's there to be used. Put down, you've got something coming up in 6 weeks' time. You request that day or a couple of days off. I think it's really good. You do miss out on stuff, like anything, and it is shift work, so you do miss out on, you work weekends, you work in the evenings. Yeah. Sometimes you don't get to do everything you want to do, but I think it's still really balanced, and I really like it because you have the option of everyone's at work, everyone's doing a 9 to 5, you're starting work at 1, you've got 4 hours while everyone else is at work, you can do what you want. Gym's really quiet, shops are quiet. You can kind of go out and do something else and it's not as busy, which I kind of like. Yeah.
And how often is it that you get, as you said, sometimes you don't get your weekends off, you don't get that time off. How often is that?
Some people at work will request to have probably 3 out of the 4 weekends of the month off, and they'll just work 1 weekend a month.
Okay.
I don't really mind working the weekends because you get the weekend rates. You do get more money for working the weekends. So unless I've got something specifically locked in for a weekend, I'm happy to work them kind of thing. So I think it kind of depends on how much you request them off.
Fair enough. And I guess that's where you can have that flexibility once again, where you're not stuck Monday to Friday between, let's say, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. as most of the working days in other industries could be, but you have a bit more flexibility with the... and I guess that's part of the decision-making that you also factored in for yourself,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Which has been really good. Yeah.
Next question that we have for you is, apart from helping people, what are the benefits of the role?
So benefits of the role, I really like, you work in a really big team, like not just with the nurses, so I'm an emergency, so you work a lot with the medical staff, medical imaging, clerical, and also the physios and like the other allied health staff members. So I really like the really big team. You get to know each other quite well. You do make a lot of friends at work, and you're sort of like, like we were talking about this earlier, like not everything works perfect all the time. Yeah. And you do get to talk to your colleagues about that sometimes, and it does make some nice bonding moments.
Definitely.
Yeah. I really love the team. Like you work in a large team and like you get really close, and I do feel like we're all in it together. And then, like I said, the other stuff, I like being on my feet the whole time. I'm not really sitting down for my job. There are like other nursing roles where you can do that, but I really like being on my feet. I actually kind of like night shift as well. Okay. I kind of like what that sort of stuff comes in.
Right. Well,
at that time.
Why is that? Why specifically night shift?
I think so. The money's good to start with. You get night shift rates.
Yeah.
I think as well, I kind of like the fact that there is a point more so with adults, where sort of from about 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. where they are asleep, they're not really coming into the emergency department as much.
Fair enough.
And so you do get sort of those 2 hours, you get to talk to your colleagues. And because of how chaotic the department can be sometimes, you sort of get that 2 hour window where you can sort of like do stuff for your patients that you wouldn't necessarily always be able to do.
Right.
When it was during the busier hours, you can start to do like more of their wound care. You can do like more of their paperwork to make it easier for their transition up to the wards. You can get them on like ED when you have like the emergency trolleys. You can maybe try and get them hospital beds so they're a bit more comfortable and stuff like that. Kind of do that sort of smaller stuff, which is always nice to do for them, yeah.
And that's fascinating because first I would think the night shift sounds like a very odd hour to be working, and it's obviously through the night and early mornings. But for you, that works well, and extra pay and
extra
all of
pay.
that.
Yeah, you do like, you have to take a day or two to like adjust your sleep cycle, but yeah, it works out really well for me.
A small little adjustment. And coming back to the fact that you said that you have a great group of people, you're all in it together. And I think that really does hold tremendous value in any kind of industry or any kind of career role that you're working. The people, you're spending probably the most amount of time, probably more than your loved ones to some capacity. So it's good to know that you found a place where you're working right now that can bond and definitely share those little inside moments as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Next question that we have for you, Sam, asked by students is, what shocked you when you first started working as a nurse?
What shocked me? So I started my grad program mid-2020. So I did about maybe 800 or 900 hours of prac hours to like, well, I was a student to become a nurse. And I think what like you sort of, you know, like it's going to be different when you graduate and you are a nurse and you're sort of ready to do that by the time you finish. But I think what kind of shocked me is like, I probably learned more in the first 6 to 12 months of being a nurse on my graduate program than you sort of do as a student.
Okay.
I think it's just a very, very large learning curve. And also I think as a student, you're not responsible for the patient the same way you are as you're a nurse. Because when you're a student, you can sort of be like, I'm the student, I'm not legally responsible for you. And also I'm not your allocated like healthcare provider. That's what the registered nurse is there for. Yeah. So I think it is that sort of like shock of being like, I am responsible for this person and like, and their care that they're receiving kind of thing. So I think from that side of things, that was a bit of a shock.
Bit of a shock, yeah.
That was more so on the wards. I think when I started an emergency, which would have been 15 months ago now, it is very different to the wards. It is a bit more chaotic. And you sort of do see stuff in emergency where you just sort of look at it and you're like, oh my God, like what is going on?
What's going on? Can you give us an example?
So it was my second week in ED. It's probably my 5th shift ever. I just started work kind of thing. And then like maybe 15 minutes in, like I just hear one of the nurses shout like, he's got a knife. And like one of my patients is just got a knife. And he's like, he's not trying to attack anyone, but he is hurting himself.
And
you're seeing that like you're very fresh still. And you're like looking at that and you're just like, oh my God, like
this is happening.
And I mean, it is a reality of healthcare and people do that, but it's very shocking.
Very shocking.
Seeing that for the first time,
absolutely. Yeah. And how often is that? Is that quite extreme? I mean, that's an extreme case.
That was an extreme case. Like, you don't really see that.
And I think that's important for listeners out there who are interested in this role, that you might see a lot of different things, right? And knowing that is part of the role and that was some of the things that you're exposed to is pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing is that you mentioned the fact that you're responsible for someone, you're legally responsible for someone.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
I felt like I sort of just adjusted with it over time. There are more senior nurses, like staff development nurses, your nurse manager, clinical nurse specialists who, like in each ward and department, who sort of can provide that support and additional education for you when like you're a new nurse or new to the area or just in general, really. Yeah. But I think it just came with time more than anything. I don't think there's really, for me anyway, there wasn't really too much to say about it because when you become a nurse, you are responsible for that person. It's it's more of like that adjustment from being a student to being a nurse where it's like kind of different. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. And very good insights there, Sam, from yourself. Jumping on to the next question that we have for you, asked by students. Do you have to go to university to become a nurse?
Yeah. So my pathway was through university. I did a Bachelor of Nursing at Notre Dame, which is a 3-year degree. But you can do, so there are enrolled nurses who go to, I believe it's just North Metro Tate for 18 months. And then you are a qualified nurse, you're an enrolled nurse, so you're not a registered nurse. So it is a slightly different skill mix and a different pay scale and stuff like that. But then if you do like being an enrolled nurse, you do have the option then of starting your Bachelor of Nursing from the halfway point. Because probably the first 18 months of being an enrolled nurse and being a registered 18 to 12 months, the first 18 to 12 months of being studying to be a registered nurse and enrolled nurse are very similar.
Okay.
So you can start a Bachelor of Nursing, like a degree at university. Like if you like being an enrolled nurse, you can start sort of at the halfway point and then work towards being a registered nurse if you want.
Fair enough. And so in your case, obviously you went through university, you're a registered nurse right now.
Yeah.
How big is the difference between the responsibilities between a registered and an enrolled nurse?
To be honest, they probably do a lot of the same work, but the pay is quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, it is less for an enrolled nurse, but you are sort of doing quite similar work. So in that sense, I feel like the university pathway is a bit, at least for me, but university pathways maybe a bit better. But yeah, again, being an enrolled nurse, you want to dip your toe in the water and just do an 18-month course to start with. You can do that and then decide if you want to become a registered nurse later on.
I think that's a great way of looking at it as well. If you're not too sure about the pathway, you can fast track it by becoming a enrolled nurse, going through TAFE and just seeing if this is for you. And then always having the option to go back and actually become a registered nurse as well.
Absolutely.
So multiple options, I think that's probably very important, and understanding that there is a difference in pay, but the responsibilities of work is quite similar.
It is, yeah.
Jumping on to our next question that we have for you is, what are the important qualities or skills needed for the role?
So I think good communication, I think for any job is obviously good, but I think for nursing in particular, I think it is very important because you are talking to patients who have a varying understanding of what's going on with them and their understanding of health and what's going on with them. So you do have to be able to like have an understanding of the concept in which you're treating the patient for or what's going on with them. And then you have to be able to like tailor that towards them as well. So you're like obviously communicating with the patients, but then you're talking to everyone else in the team looking after the patients or the medical staff as well. So you need to be able to have good skills with communicating with them. I think a lot of people will say time management, which is important, but I think more than anything, you're going to learn that on the job more so than anywhere else.
Okay.
And also as well, it's health, things change, patients deteriorate, conditions change. You can have a good time management skills, but I think that's just something you're going to pick up over time. I think, like that, just that willingness to help out as well, I think is always a big one, really.
A big one as well. So a lot of it comes down to just being on the job.
I think so,
and being able to develop those skills over time and understanding how everything works. That's good to know. So that's one thing to be aware of. Once you're in the role, you can develop these skills. I guess any advice that you would say for students who can maybe start building these skills, any kind of you can recommend to do to help build them?
I think if you're studying nursing, something I did, and I think a lot of other people do as well, is if you can get a role in the healthcare to start with. So I worked as a medical imaging assistant while I was studying nursing. Some people work as clerical staff, orderlies, health support services, stuff like that. That's a really good way. Well, one, you get to see healthcare firsthand, but I think you do already start to develop those skills immediately when you're in those roles, and also you get to work with nurses and you can see how they're working as well. That would be my advice if you are already studying. But if you're in high school already and you don't already have that opportunity because you have to be 18 plus to work in those sort of areas. I think good verbal and written communication skills is probably a big one to pick up, and I think talk to anyone and try and hold a conversation is always just a good skill to try and have.
I like that, Sam, and it's great advice as well for those who are also studying right now, becoming a nurse, whether it be for registered or enrolled, just to get that exposure, because it's always sometimes about exposure in any kind of industry.
Absolutely.
Getting familiar with the workplace environment. Next question that we have for you is, what are the most challenging aspects of the role?
So challenging aspects, look, there is a lot. Like I said, you are legally responsible for someone, which can be harrowing sometimes, especially when they are very unwell and you do have other patients to look after and you're trying to decide how you're going to allocate your care because someone's really sick and they need looking after, but you've also got other people you're looking after who are also unwell and do need your help. Obviously, the past few years, obviously health has been in the news a lot. COVID has obviously happened and changed the health industry a lot and brought it a lot more into the spotlight. And COVID's brought its own challenges with everything as well. It's changed a lot of like how the flow of emergency, it's changed some of the education pathways when you're already in the role in emergency. And yeah, like it's in the news a lot, the hospitals are at capacity, community health services aren't getting the funding they need, which means people aren't able to get the help they need in the community. So they're coming into the hospital, which obviously leads to overcrowding and at capacity. That's always something that's a really big challenge. I find it to be a really big challenge.
How much did that affect you, by the way? And did that really put a pressure on the actual career itself in terms of staying as a nurse? Yeah,
it was weird because I never worked as a registered nurse pre-COVID. So I started work in February 2020. So COVID was just starting to build up at that point. Yeah. So yeah, I never really had a concept of what it was like to be a registered nurse pre-COVID other than what I'd seen on pracs at uni. It never deterred me. It's just another challenge that you've got to try and work through and see where it goes, kind of thing. Yeah. I know for some people it did change their perspective of things a little bit because obviously everything changed very quickly and some people's concepts of what they wanted to do or their role as a nurse wasn't the same initially as what they thought was going to be before everything happened. It didn't affect me too much personally, I think, but yeah, it's just like another challenge that you have to work through. And yeah, like the roles did change a bit. And yeah, like you got to just decide if that's still
for you. And it's good to know that it is still for you.
Yeah.
And it was a massive challenge, I think, and a very unplanned situation, which no one was really prepared for, and we're not going to go deeper than that. Yeah. But yes, it's great to know that for yourself in your career, you've been able to see and get through that as well.
Yeah.
And just another question on the challenges side of things. Is there any other things that you find challenging in terms of an operational and a day-to-day things?
I think from an operational side of things, so I think when hospitals are at capacity, so if we're in a code yellow, which is an internal emergency, so the hospital's full, there are essentially no more beds in the hospital, but obviously people will still come to the emergency department. They will present to the emergency department because they need healthcare and they need something seen to. And then everything starts to clog up, which obviously is very hard because then, your patient ratios change or, the hospital's just more full, really.
And do you get quite stressed on the job when it comes to those situations?
In those situations, I do, yeah. It is stressful.
That being stressful, how do you deal with that? In leaving the work, leaving your shift, what is your process of actually dealing with all of the stresses that come with the job?
I think for me, exercise, probably. I think I will... Like if I'm on an early shift, I'll go straight to the gym after work and I'm doing 45 minutes of weights, cardio, boxing, just let it out kind of thing. Yeah. I live with 3 other housemates who are all in healthcare as well. Okay. So they understand what the system's like. So you can sort of just vent out to them. Yeah. They know what it's like. So you don't really have to explain the situation. You can just use the terminology and complain and they will just let you vent and just be like, they'll just be like, yeah, man, that sucks. And you're like, yep, it did. Thank you, for acknowledging that.
And they know it as well.
They're like, and we'll vent to each other about the same stuff. That's good. I think exercise and just having someone else to talk to that can kind of understand it and you can vent to. Yeah,
I think that's great.
It's really big. Yeah,
I think that's great advice. Once again, I like to talk a bit general as well with all careers. Yeah. At some point, there is stress involved when it gets really busy and gets challenging. How do you deal with that? I think that's very important. Yeah. And knowing how to have certain measures in place definitely helps for the longevity of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Been really good for me.
Excellent. Yeah. Next question that we have for you, Sam, asked by students is, and this is one of our most popular questions, by the way, what is the pay structure look like and how far can it go?
So pay structures, we get paid fortnightly. There is an annual salary. It is public knowledge. You can look it up, and there are different pay scales that again you can look up. So get paid fortnightly, and again there's the annual salary. You get the rate structures. So you're working the day shifts, no additional rates. Working the afternoon shift 1 to 9:30, you get an extra 15%. Night shift, you get 35%. And then Saturdays, you get 50%. Sundays, you get 75% extras.
Okay.
For pay structures, so when you start for registered nurses anyway, I'm sure it's the same for ENs, you start as a level 1.1 and each year you progress, so you're level 1.2, 1.3, so on.
Right.
Until you go up to, I think it's a 1.8 or a 1.9,
Right.
and you will get a pay increase each level you go up. And there is a point, I think, when you're a 1.8 or a 1.9 where essentially your salary will sort of stay there until you progress to a level 2. Level 2s, I believe, are more of the clinical nurses and the staff development nurses. So it is a slightly different role, and it is a promotion if you want to do sort of more of those roles.
Okay.
And then again, you can go to level 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 sort of thing and progress up again. So there are different levels. So I think nurse management's a level 3,
Yep.
nurse practitioners, I think, a level 7. And there's I think level 7's the max, and there are different levels for in between. But yeah, pay structure wise, yeah, for me at least, there'll be an annual increase until I'm a level 1.8, 1.9, and then
it stays more or less the same.
Stays more or less the same, yeah.
Okay. And just for our understanding, so
Yep.
you start at level 1,
Yep.
each year 1.1, 1.2.
Yep.
What is the average, would you say, increase between year on year?
I'd say year on year, maybe $1,500, $2,000 roughly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And these are small, but the gradual increments that are happening.
Yeah.
At 1.8, 1.9 level, it's more or less stagnant. And
Yeah.
then it's a choice whether you want to go to the next level or not.
Yeah.
Just out of interest, do people go on to the later levels, or how often or frequent is that?
Some people do. I think it depends on what you want to do and how much responsibility you want to have. Some nurses are happy to be at the 1.9, and they're like, I don't want to be a shift coordinator.
Okay.
I don't want to have all that extra responsibility. I want to just be able to go to work, like do my work and then go home.
Fair enough.
Yeah, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some people go, no, I want the extra responsibility, or I want to work more in an education capacity or a management capacity.
Yeah.
And they will progress into those roles.
Yep.
Yeah. When they're available and they've got the option to. Yeah.
Understood. And that's good to know. And as you mentioned, the salary is all public information there. But jumping into the more higher levels, let's say past level 2, even level 3, what does that look like? I mean, being the max being level 7.
Yeah.
Just for students to get an understanding out there of the pay scale.
So I think a level 7 gets maybe, I'm probably going to get this wrong, I think it's $120,000.
Okay.
I think per annum. Is their annual salary. I'm not sure, about the level 2s or 3s or anything,
Fair enough. And just coming back to you, Sam, what is your kind of ambitions and goals when it comes to that? Or are you still figuring it out?
I'm still figuring it out. So I want to get to the triage level of emergency before reassessing what I want to do, if I want to go like into management or clinical nurse specialist or staff development nurse or anything like that. I just want to get to triage level and then decide from there, kind of thing.
Go from there.
But also, so just back with that question as well, when I'm talking about that, I am talking about from the Department of Health side of things.
Okay.
You can work as a FIFO nurse for like one of the mining companies, and their pay scales are different as well.
Yep.
So if that's something else you'd want to look into as well, that's something more you'd have to look at those private companies. But so what I'm talking about is just with the Department of Health.
Department of Health.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Jumping on to our next question that we have for you, Sam, is there any other career options you can explore in the medical field from nursing?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many places you can go with it, which is what makes it so great as well. So people I know who've started out in nursing and gone on to do other things, some have gone on to do meds. They'll do nursing for a little bit and they've decided they want to do something a bit different. They want to stay in health and they'll do medicine. Some of them go into more research-based roles. So you can be a nurse researcher and they like the academia side of things and the research and all the data, so they'll go into that. Some people work as lecturers or tutors at universities, teaching nursing. So they still will work on the floor at a reduced hours and they'll do more sort of the academia side of things. Yeah. And then you can also work things like product reps for like medical companies. Like I think Philips is a really popular one where a lot of nurses will then end up working for them as product reps.
Yeah.
And then obviously you're in sort of more the corporate side of things, but some people really like that side of things as well, which is always good. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's very diverse in terms of doing a number of different things just from nursing.
Yeah, you can do a lot with it, and which is always another benefit as well, because not everyone wants to work in a hospital or GP clinic or stuff like that, and there's a lot of other places you can go with it. Some of it's more study, some of it's just different corporations.
Yeah, and have you thought about any of those other pathways for yourself?
Not yet, no. I think at this point, at least, I'd like to stay in the hospital. The hospitals, I don't see myself doing med or anything like that. Like I'm very happy being a nurse and really like the job. So I think at this point, just based in the hospital as a nurse,
Excellent. And I mean, even the fact that you can even go to a school or you can do lecturing and that,
Yeah.
it's so diverse. I mean, you can reduce your hours there. That's unbelievable. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. And hospitals provide that kind of those flexibilities, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I don't know too many people have done it, but my understanding is you just talk to your manager and say, I've got this other opportunity to your role available.
Okay.
It's this many hours, this many days a week. Like, I want to change my contract to say like 2 days a fortnight.
Yep.
And then you sort of just say, I can only work, say, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of each week.
Right.
Because the other days of the week I'm doing something else. And they're normally really accommodating with that. Yeah.
Great to know.
Yeah.
And really comforting. Once again, there's a lot of our survey questions that we got. It's always about, what kind of options can you do?
Yeah.
Do you just have to do one thing? But knowing that if you do pursue a pathway of nursing, there's so many different things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the nurses that work as well, they'll do like 3 or 4 days a fortnight in emergency. Then they'll work at like a lot of things. Something that's become popular quite recently is like the skincare clinics, which have nurses as well, and they'll do that as well, like the other half of the time, which is something that a few of the nurses I know have just started doing that, which is good. So you get training to become like, I think it's a dermal nurse or skincare nurse. Yeah. And that's like a lot more of the injections and the Botox and stuff like that. They'll do that at a clinic. Yeah. 4 or 5 days a fortnight, and they'll do the other half, at the hospital.
Great to know, and great for our listeners out there who may be, once again, considering this or doing this right now, to have the opportunities are much more broader than what you may think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Last question that we have for you, Sam.
Yeah.
Is this a career you can do for a long time?
It is, yeah. Like, there are nurses I work with who've been doing it like 40 plus years. Like, you can do it forever. Not everyone does. It's like any career. Like, some people want to change the scenes, and like we were talking about before, where you can sort of do more the corporate or education roles where you've decided you don't want to do the hospital stuff quite as much anymore. Like I said, for me personally, like I do see myself just staying in the hospital as a nurse. Yeah. It is a very strong career path. And like we've talked about before, there's a lot of diversity in it, that you can have the option of either cutting your hours down and doing something else a little bit in the meantime. Or work in a different field entirely.
Great to hear, Sam.
Yeah.
And that wraps up all our questions that we have for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for our listeners out there who have more questions for Sam that did not feature on our list today and would like to connect with him, just visit our website, careerview.com.au, and this is where you'll find Sam's profile, and you can send him more questions, which I'm sure he'll have some time at some point to answer.
Yeah, no stress.
And with every episode, please don't forget to submit the questions that you want to know, especially to young professionals who've been there, they've done that, and they can share their stories. Sam, once again, I can't thank you enough.
No, thanks
I know you have a shift later this afternoon.
Yeah, no, that's all good.
And I appreciate your time. Just one last thing before I let you go. I want to ask you, for anyone who's pursuing the pathway of becoming a nurse or is interested in becoming a nurse, any kind of words of advice, anything that you would like to share with them based on your experiences in terms of deciding that this was a career pathway for you?
Yeah, so I think, like we were saying before, write that list down of what you want to do career-wise and see what works for you. And I think just exposure to the field as early as you can to try and see if that's something that you're interested in, whether it's volunteering or getting work sort of in the health sector somewhere to get exposed to it.
I like it, Sam. Absolutely appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me. Thank you.